Hi there, Sandra here from the Schwowin's Nest. Here's a look at my top favorite DIYs. My first project for you is this calendar holder. What I'm doing here is filling in the gap between the backing and the wood on the top side of the calendar. There needed to be a space where you could slip your calendar in, but when you just look at it from the front, you can see that gap. So I'm using some of these little wood shims that I picked up at the Home Depot in a pack of 40. I like to use these. They're really easy just to score with a utility knife, and then they'll just snap in half. If you're at all familiar with shims, they are thicker on one end and thinner on the other end, so I did need to cut another smaller piece and fit it into the back. I ended up using some hot glue to hold them down, and then I used some little tack nails to hold them in place permanently. Once I had that completed, I just sanded some of the spackle down just to get the edges and everything nice and smooth. And then I'm going to give it 2 coats of Rust-Oleum linen white chalk paint. I'm using a Bennett round chalk paint brush, and when I'm doing projects like this where I don't want brush strokes, I use my chalk paint brushes, and I really love them because the paint goes on so nice and smooth and you really get good coverage. I'm going to put a stencil on the bottom half of the calendar, and I've decided to use this Home Sweet Home stencil from Jilly Bean Stencils. I'm using Rust-Oleum charcoal chalk paint and a makeup sponge to apply the paint onto the sign. There's a couple of things to remember when you're working with stencils. The first is you don't want to load too much paint onto your sponge or brush. So as you can see, I'm dipping my paint into the lid and then I'm dabbing some of the paint off into this little plate. The second thing you want to do is use a dabbing motion and vertical. So an up and down motion, not a side to side. You're not painting it on, you're dabbing it on. The stencil turned out perfectly. I'm so happy with it, and I don't have any bleeding at all. The top half of the sign is going to have a removable wreath. I'm going to use hot glue to make sure that they stay on properly. These stems are really flimsy, so I'm going to just kind of twist it into this grapevine wreath form that I'm starting out with, and then use some hot glue to hold the flowers in place. The second part of the wreath is to use some lavender blossoms. I'm just trimming these down just a little bit because they were just a bit too long, and then I'll use some hot glue as well. And I'm going to be putting these in a circle all the way around, and all of the blooms will be going in the same direction. I'm also going to try to keep them evenly spaced, and then I'll see how it looks when it's complete and if it needs a little bit more embellishment. I'm really loving how this wreath is coming together, but the single lavender blossoms were a little sparse. So I've decided to just double up on those. And so I'll do the same thing with another row all the way around, again, following the same direction. To add a little bit more texture and color, I'm going to take the ends of these lavender blossoms that I trimmed off and add those into the wreath. Again, still going in the same direction as the original lavender blooms, but I'll probably put them here and there just to kind of use them as a filler. It's a farmhouse sign. I've got to do some distressing. I'm taking some 220 grit sandpaper and just going over the edges and wherever I feel there would have been some natural wear to bring out some of the wood. These are my favorite command hooks to use. They're really small and inconspicuous, but the hook part is really nice and large, so a wreath can hang on it really nicely. I just need to find where it's going to look best, and then I'll be able to attach the command hook to the top portion of the calendar frame, and that will give the person who's going to own this eventually to be able to switch out wreaths for the seasons. If you're not familiar with how command hooks work, they're actually very easy. Each of them comes with a double-sided piece of tape, and it's not really tape, but that's what I call it. There's a black side, which is the part for the wall, and then there's a red side, which is the part that goes on the hook. So I'm going to peel off the red side, place it onto the hook, then I'll peel off the black side and place it on the mark on my calendar. The second project I have for you today is this raw wooden crate. I did take it outside already and gave it a little bit of a sanding. There were some rough edges on it. I'm going to be painting it with just some latex paint. This is a color, it's called Mushroom, and it's left over from when I painted my great room. I really like the color. It's very similar to Waverly chalk paint in mineral, I believe, but I'm just going to give this one coat because I have some other plans for it as well. I'm going to turn this crate into a vintage garden crate. I'm using these stencils that I picked up at a dollar store a couple of years ago, and I'm just going to cut the letters in half and then pop out the insides. I'm going to use the charcoal Rust-Oleum chalk paint color and the makeup sponge to apply the paint to the stencils. I'm going to put lettering on all four sides of this crate. This side will have the word herbs on it, and the other side is going to have seeds, and then I'm going to put something different on the slatted sides. I'm also going to add a couple of hand lettered words. On the top, I'm going to put organic and local on the bottom. And when I do my hand lettering, I always start in the center of the word. So A was the middle letter, and that's where I started, and then I work my way forwards and then backwards. That usually helps me to get the word more centered, but as you can see, I'm a little off today. I think it'll look okay once I've got everything complete. I'm always seeing some vintage crates with the labels kind of off kilter a little bit, so I'm not too worried about that. To make the crate look even more distressed, I'm just going to sand down the words a little bit, and then I'm going to use bare dark wax, and I like to apply the wax with a soft rag. I usually use an old t-shirt, and I'm just going to layer it a few different times just to make sure I get the color I want. The last thing I'm going to do is take that makeup sponge that I used to apply the stencils. I'm going to add a little bit of the charcoal chalk paint every once in a while, and I'm just rubbing that makeup sponge all the way across in a few spots just to give it more of a dirty and scuffed up look. On the opposite sides of the herbs and seeds words, I stenciled in the number 4, just using a few of the different sizes of stencils that I have in the same type of design. Here's what I chose to make over for the Ugly Thrift Challenge. It's a mailbox, and it was $4.99 at Value Village. The original piece had these Velcro glued on, and I just needed to get the glue off. So I'm taking my handy scraper from the Dollar Tree and just gently pushing underneath the glue so I don't pull off any of the wood. I'm going to start by giving the mailbox one coat of this Ultra Cover Rust-Oleum flat black paint. And the reason I'm doing that is because the end result is going to be a white mailbox. However, sometimes I have found that with white, some of these other colors, these floral colors, might bleed through the chalk paint. So I'm going to take this step and do it black first, so that will block anything from bleeding through onto the white paint. I'm also using my spray paint trigger that I picked up at a hardware store a while ago. I'll have that link down in my description box. It really helps to be able to control the paint a little bit better because it's a trigger rather than just pressing down with the nozzle. The black paint is fully dry now, so I'll be starting to do my coats of white. I'm just using a brush that I picked up at the dollar store, and the paint that I'm using is just latex house paint. I ended up giving this mailbox 3 coats of white paint. I'm going to do a grain sack striping on this, and I've never done this before, but I've seen a few other YouTubers do it, so I've been inspired by them. What I'm going to do first is lay down 3 strips of the painter's tape. And the reason I need 3 of them is that I'm using the center one as a spacer, which will then be removed, and that will become the first stripe. Now that I've got the black all on there, I'm going to just remove the painter's tape very gently. The paint is still a little bit wet, and then I'll wait for it to dry and start with the second stripes. To get the second set of stripes, I'm taking the painter's tape and just going over the first original stripe, and I'm doing about 1/4 of an inch of a white space there. And then I'm going to go over with another piece of tape and create a second stripe. So as you can see here, I'm really thinking about this. It took me quite a while to figure out how I was going to do this. And I did do some taping first and then had to remove it and start over. So this is what you want it to look like. So these first 2, you can see that I'm taking this 3rd one off because I did that one wrong. And what you want to do is have a piece of white showing, then you're going to mark off another stripe next to it. So you have a skinny stripe with a white gap in between. Little confusing, but it turns out beautiful in the end. So it was worth it. Here I'm painting on the secondary stripes, and they're just 2 thin stripes next to the big thick one that is the center stripe. Here's the reveal, and I'm crossing my fingers in the background, hoping that it turned out the way it was supposed to. And yes, it did. So I've got a thick stripe in the center, and I've got 2 thin stripes on the other side, which gives it the look of a grain sack striping. I'm so excited that I actually made this work. Now I'm just going to take my sandpaper again and go around some of the edges and pull off some of that white paint. Some of the sanding will go all the way down to the pine color underneath, but some of it will also show the black, which gives it a really beautiful look and texture. Since this is a mailbox, I decided to put the word mail on it. I'm using my 3-inch tall simple script stencils. I'll have a link for those down in my description box. These are my most favorite stencils that I use. I love this simple script. I thought I would pop on here real quick and let you know how you can support my channel. Of course, you can hit that red subscribe button. You can also hit the subscribe button located at the bottom right-hand corner of my video. That will allow you to hit that button, but still continue to watch. Another way you can support me as well is to hit the like button. That tells YouTube that you enjoy what you're seeing and they promote me more, which helps me grow by subscribers and by viewers. Lastly, you can hit that notification bell so YouTube will let you know every time I upload something new. You definitely don't want to miss out. I was debating on what color I should paint this bread box, but I came back to my go-to paint, which is the Rust-Oleum chalk paint in linen white. You guessed it, that's the one. And I'm just going to give it all 2 coats. I've taped it down in a couple spots using some painter's tape, and I've just made sure that the original white is really nice and dry. And now I'm just taking my Dollar Tree stencil brush and a dark country gray chalk paint and stenciling in. I'm not doing it really dark or really thick. I want it to be kind of aged and weathered, so I'm just gonna do my best not to fill it in too much. I want some of that white to be able to peek through. I had already washed the stencil when I decided to put that little embellishment, just those 2 lines and that little scroll kind of design on the top of the bread box, which is actually the door. My next project is this adorable rooster that I got for $3.99. The stand is supposed to be connected to the rooster, but it was a little bit loose when I got it. But that's actually working out to my advantage because I'll be able to paint both the stand and the rooster while they're separated, because I am going to be doing them different colors. I will be able to simply glue that back together when I'm done. I thought painting the stand and the rooster 2 different colors would be good. I'm grabbing some of the aged gray Rust-Oleum chalk paint, and I made a mess when I opened up the can, so that's why there's a big blob of it on my craft paper. But thank goodness for craft paper, I can just clean it up and start fresh again another time. So I'm just going to give this a couple of coats, and then I'm going to distress it once it's completely dry. The rooster is going to get 2 coats of Rust-Oleum linen white chalk paint, and then I will be distressing him as well. To distress the stand, I'm just using some fine grit sandpaper, and I'm just going to go over the edges that are sticking out. I'm going to be using this Weldbond glue to glue the 2 pieces back together. This is my favorite glue. I use this more than E6000 and just plain wood glue. I'm using some coarse grit sandpaper to sand the edges of the rooster. I decided to just take my screwdriver and just scrape off some paint in some strategic areas just to give it more of a rustic look. For this DIY, we are supposed to repurpose something that we already created, but maybe didn't like anymore. I don't like that wreath situation anymore, and neither do I like this sign. These are old projects that I just needed to get redone. The first thing I did was take this board outside and give it a good sanding. Of course, I had taken off all the hearts and everything that was on it, but it did need a good sanding just to kind of get some of that print off and the layers a little bit. It's going to turn out a little bit of a shiplap look, but I am going to turn this and make it a vertical sign and rather than a horizontal sign. Out of the wreath sign, I'm using one of the wreaths, and I'm going to be using the wood welcome sign as well. I'm going to be taking some burnt umber here and just painting the wreath so it's not so white. I want it to have more of a grapevine look to it. The original wreath design had these green hydrangea blossoms on it, and I've got a few more, so I decided I'm going to do an ombre effect. I'll start at the bottom with the dark leaves, and then I'll move to the lighter leaves, and then finally the white at the top. I flipped the wreath around so you can see it a little bit better. So I've got the dark green on the bottom, and then I'm gradually moving up to a softer green, and now I'm working on the white. Now that the wreath is complete, I'm going to do a little bit of fixing up of this wood welcome sign. I do like the color gray, so I'm going to keep it that way, but I'm going to distress it with a little bit of dark gray from Rust-Oleum, so the dark charcoal, and then I'm also going to take some of the linen white and give it a little bit of distressing that way too. I'm using a combination of Weldbond Glue, which is my favorite permanent glue, and hot glue just to keep it in place while the Weldbond glue has a chance to dry. The reason I like the Weldbond is it only needs about 15 minutes or so to set up, and it's still going to be tacky, but it holds things in place. I'm going to put my last name, and then underneath that I'm going to change into a different font style and just put the letters EST, which is short for established, and then the year we got married, which is 1991. Here's how it looks hanging on my wall. It has a beautiful shape to it. I love that it's nice and round and squat. And I love the little spout and the ridges on the rim of it at the top. I'm using white paint and primer in one spray paint. This is a Premier brand and I just get it at my local hardware store, but it's really nice. I started spraying it and then realized that I have a Lazy Susan, which is something that comes in really handy when you're spray painting or painting anything for that matter, because you can spin the product around and you don't have to touch it. I gave this piece almost 2.5 coats of spray paint, but you could still see those leaves through, so I decided to go over it one more time with a really soft brush and some chalk paint. And that really made a difference. First of all, in the texture of it, you could see a little bit more texture with the brush strokes, which is something that I like, and it just covered really well. I'm going to paint the rim of it black, so I'm just using a makeup sponge and some black chalk paint, and I'm just going to be really careful at how I sponge all the way around, making sure that I don't have too much paint on my sponge. I'd rather go over it a couple of times than have too much on it to start with. If you follow me on YouTube and watch my videos, you'll know that I am now addicted to printing designs on tissue paper. I'm going to take some Mod Podge and put it on my project where I want the label to be. And when I'm ready, I'll be picking it up with my paintbrush. That to me is the easiest way to be able to get it centered, because then I don't have to worry about touching it with both hands. I have one hand free to help me with the placement. Now that I've got it placed, I'm going to start from the center and push my brush outwards on the design, making sure that I always have some Mod Podge on my brush because I don't want the paper to tear. Then I pounce up and down with the brush, and that helps to get out any of the bubbles and wrinkles. I really love how this project turned out. It really looks like a vintage milk jug. The color that I'm using here is an old mist tint of paint that I picked up for $8 at a hardware store. And I haven't used it yet. I've had it for a while as well, but I decided to break out this color. It's sort of a beigey gray, and it's just a latex paint. But I'm going to be doing some other treatments to this crate to make it look old and vintage. I just gave this one coat, and this is the color. It's a nice color, I like it, but I would never leave it this way. So I'm going to use some coarse grit sandpaper and just rough up all the edges and the sides, get a little of the regular wood showing through, but then the next step is really going to bring out the sanding marks that I'm doing here. I'm using Bare Dark Wax, and this is something that I've had for a little bit. I've tried it on a few projects, and I really do like the way it looks. I'm using a soft rag, and I'm grabbing quite a bit of the wax because I want this to look old and dirty and antiqued, and that's exactly what the wax is supposed to do. So here's what it looks like antiqued with the brown wax, but I'm going to take it a step further, and I'm going to use some black chalk paint and dry brush over it, make it even more dirty, more vintage, more old looking, and to bring out a little bit more of some of the grain in the wood. I'm going to be using a couple of Jelly Bean Soup stencils that I got from Joanne Fabric and Crafts. The link to that is down in my description box. And this one says farm fresh eggs laid daily, but the stencil is a really long. You can see at the top of the screen that the laid daily is hanging right off the crate. So I'm just moving the stencil around and placing it in a way that everything is going to fit. So just because you have a big stencil doesn't mean you have to put it on the way it is on the stencil. You can move the stencil around and fit it into whatever size area you have. Here's what I'm talking about. I'm taking the chicken and moving it over to the other side of the crate because I want to have the chicken on it, but it just isn't going to fit on this size of crate. So I'm going to do the same thing with my makeup sponge and my DIY black chalk paint. On the other side of the crate, I'm going to use fresh produce locally grown. The fresh is going to be on the top slat of the crate, and then produce and locally grown, I'm going to move the stencil down and make it fit on the bottom slat of the crate. For my projects, I like to use this Minwax water-based polyacrylic. It's a protective finish, and I always get the clear matte. I don't want any gloss or anything on my projects. I'm also going to use a brand new brush, and when I'm done with this brush, I'm going to actually label it with my label maker, and I'm going to put polyacrylic on the handle so I know that this is the brush that I will always use for my top coats. Here's a look at how my crate turned out. I just adore it. And the person that I'm gifting it to has seen it just in a picture, and she loves it too. I hope you enjoyed these projects today. If you did, I'd love for you to stick around by hitting that subscribe button. The black arrow will tell you exactly where to click. Thanks again for watching. I truly appreciate each and every one of you. Take care. See you in the next one.